Hello, everyone. This is Michael Justin Lee, the president of the Ivy Dream, and welcome to another episode in our podcast channel, Aspire, in which we talk with current students and recent graduates of the most elite programs in the United States. Today, we are very happy to be joined by Danielle Mikaelian, who finished her undergraduate degree at Columbia and is now a third-year student at Harvard Law School. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Danielle, you have quite a number of matters that I'm sure our listeners would want to hear very much about. If we would, please, Danielle, would you start us on basically where you're from and a brief intro to your high school education?
Definitely. So, I am originally from Southern California. It's a city called Thousand Oaks. And I grew up going to California public schools. So, I attended a fairly large public high school called Westlake High School, where my grade was about 700 kids. While I was in high school, I was very involved on campus. I was the president of the literary magazine. I was vice president of the data science club. I was the founder of the trash pickup initiative. And then I also was in the top band as a flute player. I also was on the soccer team and had a few different areas of involvement beyond that as well. And I went from there to Columbia University, where I studied English literature.
That is quite a number of activities you participated in. Danielle, please tell us why you chose Columbia and what your thinking process is in high school as you were making your preliminary college plans.
I had the privilege of going out east with my father as a sophomore in high school to tour some of the Ivies. I think at that point it was very obvious that I was very academically driven, and since I was young, I was always top of the class, very motivated, and I just wanted to see what the Ivy League schools were. So we took 4 days and went to, I think, five of the Ivy League campuses. And after that visit, my main takeaways were that my favorite schools were Yale and Columbia. And I think for me, it was a mix of a few things. Columbia specifically, I really loved the idea that it was in New York, even though that was my first time visiting New York in my entire life. I think as someone who wanted to study English, Columbia has a top tier English program, top tier creative writing program, and it's actually the location of the Pulitzer Prize that's given out every single year for writing. So for me, I was just very drawn to that. I also was interested in the core curriculum, which is a mandatory curriculum that all Columbia students have to take that makes sure you're more of a worldly individual. You're taking everything from philosophy to mandatory art and music classes. And those classes are supposed to ensure that you're able to connect with alums down the line over these shared experiences, but they also make you a lot more worldly as a whole. Something that was very valuable to me specifically was that Columbia is actually one of the colleges with the highest international student population. So, although I was born in the US, so many of my friends were international students, as 1 in 5 students is from abroad. And that really was able to help me expand my horizons and understand cultures that were unlike mine.
One wonderful. Danielle, did you have a specific career goal in mind when you did your college applications? And how did you come upon them?
So, as a high school student, I had the privilege of being located in a town where it's home to one of the biggest academic publishing companies in the entire world, which is Sage Publications. So, as a high school student, I did intern at Sage in its production department. And as much as in the back of my mind, I was thinking something along the lines of law school later on, for me, it was really having this passion for editorial work and really wanting to use my time to make a difference in how others' words were portrayed and just seeing that difference in their final end product. So I applied to Columbia saying that I wanted to continue my editorial work and maybe go to a publishing company someday, but also with an eye towards possibly law school. So I was applying for a BA in English, and I did do that, and those were the goals I stated on my application.
Wonderful. Did you participate in any other activities that lent themselves towards that goal that you were able to detail on your applications?
I think that being president of the literary magazine at a large public high school did also support that eventual goal of majoring in English. Beyond that, I actually was writing poetry on the side at the time, and I had been published in a few publications. So I highlighted that. I also was a tutor at the writing center at my high school. So, again, just pointing to that general interest in English literature. I think beyond that, I had 99th percentile test scores for the ACT and SAT on the English sections, as well as in the SAT literature subject test. So, as much as I was trying to show that I was a well-rounded individual, I also wanted to show I do have this spike in a specific area. There is an area of strength for me, and when I am ultimately going to any undergraduate institution, I will be relying mainly on that ability. And that's what I did. I went to Columbia, I stuck to the major I applied with, and it worked out.
Wonderful. That is wonderful. How did you handle your recommenders? How did you choose them?
For me, when it came to choosing recommenders, it was important to not only have taken a class with the professor, but to also have a more personal relationship. So for me, my recommenders were professors that I had taken various classes with, in addition to serving on leadership roles in clubs that they supervised. So, for instance, I was applying for English literature, and one of my recommenders was my English professor. So, I had taken multiple classes with her, and she was the supervisor for the literary magazine that I was president of. On top of that, then my other recommender was my environmental science teacher, and I had a leadership role in the environmental science club and had started the trash pickup and recycling program at my high school. So both of those professors not only could speak to my academic strengths, but also speak to my drive as a whole and my activities outside of the classroom.
Absolutely, absolutely impressive. Wonderful. Now we can jump forward to Columbia. I happen to be from New York City myself, so I know the various opportunities and challenges of going to school there. Overall, did you enjoy the environment of Columbia? Define that any way you wish.
I very much enjoyed Columbia's community. I had touched on that international aspect and believe that attending classes with individuals around the world really did make me a more worldly individual. I will say it did require a learning curve, though, something I recognized going into Columbia as a public high school student was that my English curriculum had not prepared me enough to academically succeed against a lot of the private school graduates that were at Columbia with me. So I remember during my first semester really having to dedicate some additional time to learning how to write a proper college essay and so on, and realizing that a lot of my peers at private schools had already read the coursework in their curriculums. So, in that regard, I was surprised. I think also, as someone who grew up in California, certain career paths that many of my peers were talking about, like investment banking and consulting, were never on my radar. So, it just took a lot of time to understand what those things were, what they were talking about, and why anyone would want to pursue those fields. But in the end, Columbia really was transformative for me. And I think it's one of the reasons I've made it this far in life. And I'm very grateful to this day to have had that experience. I will never forget the moment I was accepted to Columbia. I just went crazy. I was started crying of joy just because that was something I had never expected would be available to me as much as I had worked so hard for it.
That is wonderful. So pleasant to hear. In specifically your major, how did your studies at Columbia fulfill or perhaps came up short compared to expectations from when you arrived?
I think that the English department at Columbia is top tier. For me, it was striking an ideal balance between studying the required coursework. For me, I was specifically drawn to British literature, so I took multiple courses like Shakespeare. And on top of that, also taking advantage of the creative writing department. Columbia does give you the opportunity to take some creative writing classes and count them within the English major. So for me, that was an invaluable opportunity as someone who had been published a few times in high school. And in that regard, I took different fiction classes, I took different poetry classes, and it was an invaluable opportunity to both have the chance to write and also receive feedback from my peers on that work. So after graduating, I have not had as many of those opportunities, and I'm very grateful to Columbia for really making me the writer that I am today. I think without going through that program and being challenged to that extent, my overall writing would have been a lot weaker. And I think Columbia truly did help me find my personal voice as I've continued on.
Wonderful. That is wonderful. Um, Danielle, you said something very interesting is that when you arrived at Columbia, you met people who had interests that you had not yourself considered. Did you have law as a career goal when you arrived at Columbia?
I always had law in the back of my mind. I was one of those kids that growing up, somehow everyone kept telling me, you would be a great lawyer. You would be a great lawyer. They would tell my parents that. And it's just funny because I have no lawyers in my entire extended family. So I didn't even know what that really looked like beyond the typical Judge Judy shows on television. But people had said that to me enough where it was in the back of my mind, and I knew, given my strength in the humanities, that that might be an ideal path for me. But because of that, I came into Columbia with that general thought in the back of my mind, and then I became extremely involved in the pre-law community. I was on the board of the Undergrad Law Review. I was on the board of the Women in Law and Politics Club. I ended up launching their Women in Law and Politics journal as a student. And all of these experiences helped me get in front of attorneys and actually hear from them what their career paths were like. Beyond that, during my second summer of undergrad, I did intern at a small law firm in my hometown and gained that first hand experience of working for an actual law firm. And all of those experiences collectively showed me, okay, I think I should go to law school.
Well, that's an incredible number of extracurricular activities you had at Columbia. When did you decide that you would definitely pursue the study of law after college?
I think as an English major that doesn't really know what your path would be otherwise, part of me had determined that as a first year in college, although I did have a few doubts in the back of my mind. But as I continued through my undergraduate education, it just became further and further solidified. And I used to tell my friends at Columbia, sure, I'm an English major, but this is my pathway to law school. And unfortunately, I would always joke how I wasn't able to major in pre law. Most undergraduate institutions don't have that opportunity. But if I had been given the chance, as much as I did enjoy the English major, I really was solid in my belief that I should be attending law school. And I probably would have chosen that track. But I think that there's never a certain path forward for anyone necessarily. But for me, I was fairly solid in the belief that I should attend law school. And look where we are today.
Yes, indeed, indeed. When did you start studying for your LSAT?
For me, I started briefly during my junior year of college, and then I quickly realized that I just did not have the bandwidth to give the test enough time and energy when I was very involved on the Columbia campus. I was on over 10 executive boards at Columbia by the time I graduated. So for me, I actually did graduate during that COVID period. So we were kicked off of campus my junior year spring, never fully made it back on campus. And then I studied a little more during my senior year, but it was really in that gap period after I graduated where I really focused on the test and studying and managed to get it done.
Mm. And similar to my question earlier about Columbia, how did you handle your recommenders for law school?
I took a very similar approach to what I did in undergrad. And in that regard, I consulted professors who I had taken multiple courses with. I asked my English professor at Columbia, who I had taken 3 to 4 courses with, in addition to one other professor that I had also taken 3 to 4 courses with, because I do truly think it makes a difference when a professor can view you through that lens and speak to your performance over a longer period of time versus only one class. However, I do recognize not every student is in a situation where they can take multiple classes with a professor.
Danielle, how did you choose the law schools to which you did apply?
When it comes to the law school application process, much of it is stats based. I typically tell people that 90% of the law school admissions process is stats based, which is a lot less holistic than the undergraduate admissions process. And in that regard, I had very high stats. I had a very high LSAT score. So I knew what category of schools I was targeting. In the law world, we call them the T14. So those are the top 14 law schools per the annual rankings. And by applying to the majority of them, it actually does increase your chance of scholarship money because the schools, many of them, not Harvard, do give merit scholarships to incentivize you to go there. So, in that regard, I pretty much blanketed that set of schools to maximize chances at merit scholarships while also maximizing my chances of obtaining admission. And in that regard, it was a fairly easy process for me. I knew what set of schools I was looking at. And to me, it's never really been a question of geography as much. I have been willing to move across the country for my education. It's really about having the best educational opportunities that are provided to me.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Danielle, in your applications, were you able to specify a particular career path upon graduation from law school?
For me, much of my application revolved around one, highlighting my prior experiences that touched upon corporate and business law as I had interned during undergrad for that law firm, as well as been part of the undergraduate law review and so on at Columbia. In addition to really highlighting my human rights work, I am ethnically Armenian and I'm the descendant of orphaned Armenian genocide survivors who fled to the US during the genocide. And for me, my identity and my background has been extremely important when it comes to what I've been involved in and how I've advocated for different causes throughout the years. In that regard, when I was at Columbia, I was president of the Armenian Society and I was involved in numerous other organizations promoting the Armenian cause. And upon graduating, I worked for the largest Armenian advocacy organization in the United States, which is called the Armenian National Committee of America. So for me, it was also highlighting those experiences as well. While I am planning on going into a corporate facing role, my identity has been very important, and I always do that on the side and make sure to give back to the community that has supported me so much throughout the years, because not many individuals of my background make it into schools like Columbia or Harvard. Every time I've been admitted to any of these institutions, I've been maybe one to two Armenian students in the entire year, if there's any. So I do not take that privilege for granted.
One that is very impressive, indeed, very impressive. Danielle, let's back up a couple of years. You're about to arrive at Harvard Law School. Were you concerned about the method of teaching at Harvard?
I don't believe I was concerned about the method of teaching. I knew that law school in itself would require a large learning curve. Again, I mentioned previously that I'm the first person to attend law school in my entire extended family. And there's a lot to adapt to when you come into law school. For one, every class is based on a cold call system for the most part during the first year. And you have to go into class knowing that at any second you might be randomly called upon by the professor about any details about the case. So it's very hard to thoroughly prepare for every class. And then there's obviously the peer pressure of, oh, I answered this question wrong. What do my classmates think of me? And so on. But I think it's very important when it comes to things like that to remember that certain things aren't graded. And you really do have to give yourself grace when you're at these level of institutions. I am surrounded by some of the smartest, highest achieving people in the entire world. And it's very hard to remember that sometimes. We can be hard on ourselves, especially when you are also a high achieving individual and you want to be doing well. But in the end, we are all at Harvard Law School, and I fully believe that there are so many great opportunities laid out ahead of us that we really should be focused on coming together, supporting each other, and doing what we can to foster a positive environment.
That's lovely. And knowing your background a little bit as I do, you seem to have continued your high school and undergraduate intensity to participate in extracurriculars. Can you tell us some of what you're doing now?
Definitely. So I have always been very, very involved in any educational institution I find myself in. In that regard, I was named Columbia's 2021 Student of the Year in 2021 due to my involvement on campus, and I received some other leadership awards as well. But coming into Harvard, it was again very important to me to become involved because that's one of the ways through which I give back to an institution. And again, I've never taken the opportunity to attend these schools for granted. So, as of now, one, I've engaged in very practical legal experience at Harvard. I was a student in the cyber law clinic dealing with issues regarding internet law last year. I'm currently a legal fellow for the Federal Reserve of Boston, and I work with their Office of Community Development on a wide variety of different issues. As a first year, I became involved in a few different student practice organizations that again had me working with real clients. So, one was the Harvard Law Entrepreneurship Project, where I was working with startups. And then the other one was the Recording Artist Project, where I was working with clients in the entertainment industry. Beyond that, I had already mentioned that my ethnic background is extremely, extremely important to me. And I'm the co president of the Armenian Law Student Association here. Beyond that, one of my biggest organizations that I've been a part of is the Harvard Association for Law and Business. So that's one of the largest organizations on Harvard Law's campus. And I joined the board as a first year. It's an incredibly competitive process to get on, so I was very grateful for the opportunity. And then I stayed on for all 3 years. And through that organization, I've done everything from hosting CEOs and chief legal officers to visiting Dubai and going to visit law firms there to network. So that's been an incredible opportunity as well.
Danielle, that's very interesting what you said about your extracurriculars in entertainment law. Could you go into a little detail about how you got into it and what you're doing among them?
Growing up in Los Angeles, I always had an interest in entertainment law, and in that regard, I came to Harvard and immediately became very involved in the different entertainment law offerings. So I have served on the board of the Committee of Sports and Entertainment Law. I have been the co-managing editor of the Journal of Sports and Entertainment Law here. And then in addition to that, I have volunteered through our student practice organization, which is the Recording Artist Project. So the Recording Artist Project sources clients from the entertainment industry, and then students volunteer their time to help address their legal needs. So through that organization, I've done everything from helping an entertainment industry manager who was based in the Bahamas with a contract and so on. And beyond that, Harvard does provide additional opportunities through which we can be exposed to these kinds of areas. I actually was able to apply to attend an entertainment law conference in Panama City through Harvard a few months ago, and I'll be leaving for that in a few weeks.
Danielle, what are your career goals at this point?
So, I spent the last 2 summers working at large transactional law firms in New York, and I was privileged enough to receive full time return offers from both of them. So, I will be returning to New York after my Columbia days and working at a large transactional law firm.
Danielle, you have a large number of friends from outside the United States. Do you have any idea how they're handling the job search process upon graduation?
So, there are two different law programs at Harvard through which international students can obtain degrees. The first one is the one I'm pursuing, which is the regular JD track. There are less international students pursuing a regular USJD, often because if you're coming from abroad, the JD typically is an undergraduate degree in other countries. What I would say when it comes to international students is the vast majority of them have the same opportunities in the JD program as I would, with a few exceptions. In that regard, there's something called clerking that's very prestigious, and you work for US judges after graduation. And I do know that many international students are unable to obtain those clerkships because of their citizenship. In addition to that, we have the LLM program where that's just a 1 year master's of law after you complete your JD elsewhere in another country. That program is entirely international. But I will say that program in the end does place some people in US based jobs, but typically it's the JD program that has more of a guarantee regarding placing international students in jobs that would help them stay in the US despite their visa status. Because obviously, you need the employer to sponsor your visa. And based off my conversations with law firms, they are much more willing to do that for JD candidates than LLMs. It's potentially just because they think the LLMs are coming for a year and they might want to go back to their country.
That's wonderful. I think I can assume you'll resume your various activities in New York upon arriving again, will you?
I think that it has become obvious to me that I always do enjoy my educational and professional pursuits, but I do like being well rounded and engaging in a variety of activities. So, in that regard, I do anticipate doing things outside of work if I have the time when I come back to New York. One organization that I've been involved with in the past is the Armenian Bar Association, and I do anticipate working alongside them and volunteering my time. Beyond that, my firm does have a very active pro bono program, so I picture myself helping individuals through that as well.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Danielle, let's project out 20, 30 years. Looking back upon your life and career, what would you say would define success in your life?
For me, it's very much about giving back to the next generation and passing on the institutional knowledge that I myself have been able to gain across the years. As a high school student who never imagined I'd be where I am now, I just spent hours online on forums like College Confidential and Reddit, teaching myself every aspect of the undergrad and then law school admissions process. And the same happened when it came to legal recruiting. It's just asking a million questions, spending hours online to learn how to navigate every step of the way. And I think those experiences have shown me how difficult it is to navigate these spaces without that institutional knowledge. I mentioned that I am one of the only students in my background to ever go to Columbia and Harvard. And in that regard, I really did not have people to look up to growing up that were in my shoes that I could consult for advice. So even as a law student, I have made it a priority to give back to those who come after me. I often speak to different clubs at universities about the entire law school admissions process. And I think, as much as I do hope to have a successful career, and that may come about in a variety of ways. I could see myself eventually pivoting to the business side of things. I could see myself being the chief legal officer at a company. It's really about using those experiences to help others as well, because I think a lot of people get very caught up in what they're doing and they forget that aspect of giving back and just being grateful to have these opportunities.
That is very encouraging to hear. Danielle, you've shared a great deal with us, for which we are very, very grateful. And we'd like to wish you well on whichever direction professionally, academically, that you'll go on. And I'd like to invite you to keep us apprised of your various activities. And at a future time, as there's more and more to say about your journey, feel free to come back, rejoin us, and be an alumnus of Aspire and for an updated interview whenever you feel.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, and it was a pleasure being on the podcast today.
It is our pleasure. To the audience, we have just been speaking with Danielle Mikaelian, who finished her undergraduate at Columbia and is now a third year student at Harvard Law School. Thank you all for joining us. We wish you well. Bye bye.